I'm going to call it the Blue Book.
Right.
It's been around the reducing
Is that the
vulnerability.
Hawkesbury one?
The Hawkesbury one,
Right,
which needs to be used throughout most of New South Wales.
Right.
Has information about structural soundness and building materials and the like. I do know that the flood inquiry has RA and DeFi looking at with the building codes, updating building codes, but that is not a quick process at all to update building codes. It's a 7 to 10 year leeway timeline to update the building codes. But yeah, it's been part of the flood inquiry and part of the state disaster mitigation plans also.
Sure. Thanks, Mel. And Mel, congratulations on getting this guideline through. It's been a very difficult thing to navigate. And so you've done a great service for us all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Some really good questions there. One of the other questions in here was from Catherine. I guess it kind of links to Peter's question about those longer duration flood events or anything that's not considered flash flooding. So yeah, Catherine was asking about the long duration riverine flooding, which Maitland LGA is definitely susceptible to, and if there's any guidelines or intention for things for longer duration flood events.
Well, the shelter in place guideline for flash flooding we started back in 2000. Government started researching it back in 2011, 2012, so it's 2025. But there is significant risk as soon as you get for the longer duration, you have a lot of secondary risks that then start to get triggered, and SES are not in a position to entertain the longer duration sheltering in place. So that's why the flash flooding. We did a lot of work with New South Wales SES and DQ to be able to get the guideline out, and what considerations are there to get a minimum shelter in place guideline out there, and that's why it is for flash flooding at the moment only. And at the moment there is no look at longer duration, just because they start to trigger a lot of secondary risks. That doesn't mean that councils can't do, as part of their flood risk management study plan, look at their own potential isolation and areas that they find the risk acceptable or tolerable to be able to enable areas to do other things, but that would be a council decision based on their own risk. So there was other shelter in place guidelines that councils have done in New South Wales through their own policy. So there's nothing that stops councils doing their own shelter in place if they want to do it for the longer duration, provided that they actually have done looked at the risk and considered the risk for those people that would be isolated, and also in conjunction with SES, given that isolation causes a lot of other secondary issues and resupply issues and medical issues.
Yep. No worries. I guess opening it up to the floor, does anyone else have anything that's sprung to mind off the back of Melanie's presentation that, and any questions or comments or anything else like that?
Sorry, Tom, I just had a quick question for Mel. Thank you. As everyone said, that was really interesting and helpful. When you've just been referring to other councils that have done their own kind of research or investigations to look at where they've areas that may be suitable for shelter in place or longer durations may be suitable, do you have a list of examples of councils that have gone through that process, or do you know any off the top of your head? I know you mentioned Parramatta. So
Parramatta, Tweed, Northern Beaches, 3 councils. I know Northern Beaches definitely, because I did the research when I was out part of Pittwater Council. But Tweed at the time also had a shelter in place policy, so Danny Rose and his team, and then Parramatta also has a shelter in place. And they've actually included some of their shelter in place in some LEP clauses as well for some areas. And
okay, thank you.
I don't know whether Phil had anything further.
No, I was just going to add to that, Mel. You're right with those ones, but also that we suggest that councils look at the shelter in place through new flood risk management studies and plans as well to support this work. So, and to give councils more strategic and merit-based approaches, as you're saying, Mel, that the guidelines suggest, so that they should be looked in that strategic document.
Yeah, so just looking at more so not where areas where you can do shelter in place, but more so the areas where shelter in place would be unacceptable to be put in based on the flood risk.
That's right.
Fantastic. We'll have a few other kind of general comments. One of them was how applicants can demonstrate that all performance measures will be maintained for the life of the development.
Yeah, so this is one for proponents to put in, whether they consider it as a covenant on the land or not. Yeah, through planning measures.
Fantastic. We're starting to run a bit dry now. What were you going to say, Melanie?
I think Richard had his hand up.
Oh, Richard's got your hand up. Perfect. You have to come off mute, Richard.
Thanks for that, Tom. I always do it. But I'm just really keen just to hear from Melanie on what is the process and whether it's ever likely or practical that the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act could get updated to include the same sort of provisions that
it's on our list.
Enjoys. Yeah.
It's on our list, and it's been on our list for a long time. To update the Act is also similar to the building codes. Is a long time to get through there, but it is part of our list to look at the need, especially as more flood mitigation options are relied on, like floodgates and that, to make sure that they're maintained and regularly looked at, similar to fire provisions. It's definitely on my team's to start to push those changes through to actually look at how we can incorporate something similar to the fire regulations for flooding. And we'll reach out to, DQ and our normal SES for RAs when we go through that process. You're not the first one, Richard, and don't know. I think I also asked it back when I was at local council, how do we get people to actually make sure they're compliant with it? Suggest, like, if council, I know then it's the burden on council's compliance officers to check that things are maintained, which is a very big burden as well. So having a look that when you are approving these flood mitigation options, whether they are suitable to be maintained for the life of the development or whether it is an unacceptable mitigation management option.
Fantastic. All right. If no one else has anything else, any other questions or go for it. Mike's yours again, Richard.
Just if I can, I was just wondering if there's any opportunity to expand. Maybe a question for the floor rather than yourself, Melanie. But just is there opportunities to expand upon the your mandatory conditions of consent to include some some optional ones, ones that may include conditions for having a basement car park entrance above the PMFs, signage or some sort of alarms or some way which would prevent people leaving the car park during flash flooding.
Yeah, not to do with shelter in place, different thing, but yeah. There's nothing that stops council from putting any of those as part of their conditions of consent onto any building, whether it's flash flooding or long duration flooding through there. There's lots. I think there's a huge list of conditions of consent that can be potentially developed to provide councils with alternate a place to go to have a look for them. I know basements is becoming a big issue, and lift designs is also becoming a big issue.
Is there somewhere that there's like a list of those ones, or council just maintains that list themselves?
I would suggest council, I'm going to go back to putting on my council day. I literally had a running list of all the conditions of consent that I put on any DA, and I pretty much copied and pasted them when they had similar considerations.
No worries.
Yeah.
Mel, I've got another question, if that's okay. I feel like all the department people are hogging the time, but good to have you here. So when I know you mentioned the H5, H6 hazard on roadways was highlighted as the fact that the roads can get damaged. It can sort of increase the period of isolation if emergency services and things can't get through or people can't leave once floodwaters recede. With the location of the building itself being in H5, H6 hazards, if the buildings have been structurally designed to withstand those flood forces, I could see a situation where people or proponents would be saying, well, that's a non-issue then because we're in a high hazard floodway because our building can withstand it. So what's the sort of rationale, I guess, around that being excluded, or is there a sort of argument against that you could?
We shouldn't be there in the first place. So you're trying to keep people out of the most high risk areas of a floodplain, and by putting them in a floodway, one, they shouldn't be built on a floodplain that goes against the ministerial direction, but also making sure that you're not putting anybody at increased risk. And those H5, H6 areas are those areas of increased risk.
Yeah, thanks.
So they're deemed to have a higher risk to life.
I'd jump in and ask a question off the back of that one. Matt Swan from Newcastle Council. We've got quite a bit of land that is zoned H5 or is in H5 areas and it's flash flood affected, and there's existing uses on those lots. Would you be recommending that we don't allow intensification on those lots?
I'm not recommending anything, but it is there as consideration. If council deems that risk is too great, then the guideline is there to be able to give council that clarity to be able to say it doesn't meet the considerations written by the department. I don't know, Newcastle, a lot of there's a lot of areas that have got some very flash flood areas, but Newcastle also has the early warning system. So it's taking that consideration and part of your risk assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Got Ange with your hand up again.
Yeah, I have.
Fire away, Ange. Yeah.
Partly to back up what Matthew's just said there, certainly when the site itself has H5, H6, the guidance is reasonably clear. What happens in lots of other areas is, and certainly, again, putting my Sydney hat on, most of Greater Sydney, the roads at various recurrence intervals will be H5, H6, and these are the ones where quite often they're proposing significant intensification of development. That flash flooding may be very short term, and quite often it's due to the fact that the roads are quite steep. So we've got high velocities on them, even though we've got shallow depth. So it does come down to, no matter how much good guidance we have, it'll only ever be guidance. There does need to be a lot of merits-based assessment that comes into this. And certainly a lot of those ones where you've got advice that says shouldn't be in H5 or H6, quite often shelter in place is actually the only possibility for those places, because the last thing we want is people going out onto those roadways during a storm event. So it's not easy. No matter what we're assessing, no matter what guidance we have, it is never an easy decision to work through. And I think that will always be the case, that there will always be difficult decisions to be made, and whether what we're being presented is better than what is already there will also be a very difficult decision to work through.
Excellent. Okay, I can't see any other hands up or questions in the chat, so we could call it here. I just want to thank you again, Melanie, for giving up an hour of your time today to present to everyone on the updated guidelines. So yeah, thank you very much once again. It was great. Yeah. Just in terms of the future roundtables that we look to host every couple of months, if anyone from any of the councils has any topics of interest or anything like that that they would like to see presented on, or if you'd like to present on something, volunteer yourself, feel absolutely free to reach out to any of the Hunter Central Coast flooding team. And yeah, we can look to organise something for the next roundtable. I just saw, Phil, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's not about the roundtable like next topics, but I just got an update from MCAF when that's finished. If there's any discussion on what's the roundtable.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, if there's any future topics of interest, or if any of the council reps would like to present on anything, the opportunity is always there, and feel free to reach out. Andy, you've got your hand up.
Yes, please. I'm just wondering if you have any recording after this meeting, because I'm a little bit late for this.
That's an excellent question. I don't believe we did record.
Guidelines.
I can send my presentation through to you, Tom, so you can then.
Okay. Yeah, if you're comfortable to do that, Melanie.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can circulate that, Andy. Yeah. No worries. Phil, did you want to give your MCAF update now?
Yeah, just quickly, because I know most of the councils in the room have been involved to a certain extent. We've been doing the flood warning improvement projects for the Hunter and Central Coast areas. The public exhibition's just finished. We didn't get many comments, but we'll be finalising those reports in the next month or so. We'll have our contractors, MHL, on site doing site suitability with the Bureau over the next couple of months. And we may be coming to councils once we've looked at the new gauge locations after site suitability and requesting some landowner approvals, because a lot of these have been road reserves or the such. So just a heads up for that. And the other one is the RA/our team, or DQ, SDM, the State Disaster Mitigation Plan levy action. There's a survey out there for maintenance issues and governance that we've asked councils to look at. It'd be appreciated if councils had time to fill that in. I think it was supposed to close this week, but it'll be extended to allow councils to have more responses. But if there's any questions or anyone wants any extra information, feel free to email me or call me.
No worries. Thanks, Phil. Okay, everyone, we might wrap things up. So yeah, thank you once again for joining us today. Once again, thanks, Melanie, for the presentation. It was amazing. And we'll catch up with everyone, I guess, at the next roundtable or through the various kind of interactions that the department has with all of our council colleagues. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
See you later.
Tom.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
Janelle. Thanks, Tom.
See you next time.